Greg, this one's for you because it has to do with a sermon you preached recently. Can you explain the difference between your concept of being present and Tolle's, his living in the now?
Okay, yeah, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. But the idea of staying present is, I think, insofar as it goes, good. Whether it's espoused by whatever tradition, that is just a better way to live, aware in the now, to be fully alive and fully awake, and not caught up in the past, not caught up in the future. So there's that amount of commonality between Eckhart Tolle's staying present, living in the now, as he calls it, and the practice of the presence, which is advocated by Brother Lawrence and Frank Laubach. But from there, they diverge radically because the goal of the living in the now is to realize that you are one with the source or life or God or I am. That's the goal, to realize that there is no separation between you and all things. Whereas the goal in the Christian tradition is to not lose yourself, but rather find your true self by being related to God, perfectly in love with God, submitted to God, yielded to God on a moment-by-moment basis, surrendering over to His love. Love is the highest reality in the biblical tradition, whereas self is the highest reality in the Eastern tradition, at least the ones that Eckhart Tolle and company are tapping into. It really comes down to a difference in what you believe. For Eckhart Tolle, see, he doesn't realize he's believing this, but because he thinks he's just pure aware. But he believes he is the all. The ocean self is the all. I believe that part of the reality I want to become open to, we want to become aware of the facts. We agree on that. Live in the now, aware of the facts, he says. But I believe that part of the facts is that God is ever present. God always exists. I'm submerged in an ocean of God's infinite love at every second. So for me to wake up to reality is to wake up to that reality, to include that as part of my moment-by-moment awareness of reality. Eckhart doesn't believe that. His idea is rather that he is God, and so he is trying to wake up to that fact. He has a different view of reality. A major difference, and I'm just writing about this in this book that I'm doing on practicing the presence, discussing Brother Lawrence, Frank Laubach, and others who practice this in the church tradition. But while the Brother Lawrence and others who have advocated practicing the presence in the Christian tradition, they're very aware that they're exercising faith, that they have beliefs. Whereas Eckhart Tolle seems not to be. He seems to think that his awareness is simply awareness of truth, and he's not aware of how much he interprets reality in the process of thinking he's just aware of it.
Nothing to add to that, but maybe to add a question. I know through the last number of years, your books, particularly Seeing is Believing and even Escaping the Matrix sometimes, have been accused of tapping into New Age thought at some point, particularly visualization. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's the irony. I mean, the irony is, you've seen me here get as animated and peeved as I ever get criticizing the New Age. It's something that tremendously bothers me. And yet, I myself get accused of being New Age. Go figure. You can't win in this world. You just can't win. But yeah, so some have thought that the practice of seeing in your mind imaginatively Jesus Christ as in prayer is a New Age practice. A man wrote a book in the early 90s that alleged that any practice of visualization, what he called visualization, where you imaginatively see spiritual realities and you talk to Jesus and things of that sort, it's all New Age. And so he blasted everybody from Paul Cho in North Korea to David Siemens, Richard Foster, and a number of others, folks who advocate this. My response would be, there's a number of responses I would give, but I guess the most fundamental one is that you find in the Bible the Apostle Paul and others advocating that to see the Lord in our mind. In fact, if you read 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and 4, it's all about how God, when we turn to Him, has lifted the veil in our mind so we can see in our mind the glory of God. And we are transformed from one degree of glory to another. The whole thing is talking about our mind, and the Bible stresses a lot about vision and dreams, which is all part of stuff we see in our mind. And this practice has gone on throughout all church history. It's called the cataphatic prayer tradition. And so it just doesn't do any good to say that the Christians are borrowing from the New Agers when the Christians had it for centuries before the New Agers ever thought about embracing it. That's why I stress, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which unfortunately there's a long tradition of Christians doing. If there's, bad dancing, well then get rid of all dancing. If there's bad movies, get rid of all, get rid of all movies. If some music is used to worship Satan, get rid of all music. And you find we instead of recovering it, the right use for it in Jesus' name, we end up surrendering the whole thing to Satan. And that's just not a wise way to take back the world for Jesus Christ. In fact, one of the ways you can tell that there is a true godly application of something is to ask the question, is there a counterfeit? Because the enemy never makes counterfeits of things for which there is no real version of it. You don't make counterfeit $7 bills because there are no real $7 bills. What would be the point? So if there's a false use of imagination, and the New Age does that, that means there must be a true use of the imagination. So rather than collapsing imagination, let's seek the Word and seek the Christian tradition to say, what is that true use?